Welcome to Professionals and Coffee, a volunteer collective for brewing networking opportunities. I'm Carolina Salinas, founder and host of this initiative. In this episode, Professionals and Coffee, we will talk about what is crisis communication and effective practices for an organization with Shawn Hall, co-founder of Apogee Public Relations. And as a co-host, today we have Saurav Rathore, a communications and marketing professionals in Toronto. Welcome both to Professionals and Coffee.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Carolina. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to co-host the coffee chat with you. Hi, Shawn.
Hello.
Hi. So, Shawn, right off the bat, I wanted to ask you that you have had 30 years of career experience. You started your journey with journalism before eventually you got into Apogee Public Relations as a co-founder. So how did your early experience, shape your approach to storytelling and communication? Could you throw some light on that?
Yeah, fair enough. 30 years sounds like a long time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So when my first career, starting as a teenager in my hometown, I always worked for small town community newspapers, and so you can never get closer to your audience than working in a community newspaper like that, and that understanding of audience and how they respond to information and stories has really been a foundation of my career since then. And a couple of other things that I think are important there is research and writing. So as a reporter, you have to write a number of articles in a week. You're having to do a lot of research, figuring out where to go to get information, figuring out who to get information from, and then bringing a chaos of inputs and often competing information together into a short, concise whole and a story, and then combining that, of course, with very strong writing skills that are that where you can also write very quickly, and all of that really has formed the foundation of my career. Writing remains absolutely critical throughout any area of communications that you're going to work in. Journalism is just one path to develop those skills. There's lots of other ways to develop them, but whatever path you are taking, I think working on developing those keen research skills, good writing skills, and the ability to really understand audiences is crucial.
All right. Coming back to your current organization, sorry, Apogee Public Relations. We know that crisis communication is a key component of public relations to manage reputation of organizations. So for people who do not know exactly what crisis communication is, can you tell us a little bit about that? And additionally, what guidelines should be followed, when responding to a crisis when it comes to an organization?
No, absolutely. So a crisis, for our purposes, when we're talking about a communications crisis, can be defined as any event that has the potential to negatively impact your organization's reputation. So it could be an operational crisis, it could be a flood, a forest fire, it could be a death or an injury on a job site. It could be a reputational crisis, someone's behaving poorly, allegations are made, that type of thing. It can also be an electronic crisis. It could be a hack. It could be a case of identity theft, a breach that results in customer information being stolen, those types of things. So crisis communications is the branch of PR that's involved in communicating through a crisis and through that challenging time. And typically you'd be partnering with a number of other departments in a crisis. You'd work with, obviously, the executive, the leadership of your organization, operations, legal, finance. The specifics are going to vary with the nature of the event. And one of the important things in a crisis is to have a playbook, have a way that you are going to manage crises. Every crisis is going to be different. I've seen crises plans that try to predict every single possible crisis that's going to happen. Then when a crisis hits, inevitably it's something that they didn't predict. And so, and so what's really important in that is to have a good process, to have a strong understanding of how it is that you're going to manage a crisis, and something that's not too complex. I mean, there are some organizations that are in crises every day. Often a lot of small crises where you have a team that has honed skills that they're regularly practicing and putting to use. I was at TELUS for 14 years, so I was their director of social and media relations when I left there and formed Apogee Public Relations. And we were in constant crises because there was forever an outage. You know, a cable was getting cut, or there was an outage or something like that. So we were constantly working those skills and refining them. That's not common. It's far more common that an organization might see a crisis every few months or even every few years. But they have the potential to shut your business down if you don't respond well, to prompt a CEO to have to resign and the like. So it's important that you're prepared. So have a plan. Know what you're going to do and how you're going to respond. Understand that every crisis is going to be unique, and so have a plan that's scalable, from the very, very small sort of routine issue up to something that is threatens the very foundations of your organization. And regardless of the crises, people expect transparency, humility, and action. They want to know that you care, that you're taking the situation seriously. They also want to know that you're competent. And if you're empathetic and caring and you're competent, that maintains trust, or can start rebuilding trust if necessary. And really, this is all about trust. And that's hard to fake. And so the best way to develop trust is to really be empathetic, to really be competent and know what you're talking about. And if an error was made, if a mistake was made, admit to it, own it. But also importantly, speak to what you're going to do to make it right and follow through on that. Sometimes that's a technical thing, sometimes that's a change, sometimes that's financial compensation. Every situation's different, and people will generally forgive an honest error or an accident that happens, but they won't forgive a poor response to one. And so you can all think of instances where organizations came off as evasive. They tried to avoid responsibility. They made excuses. They were slow in a response. They kind of hoped that things would just go away. They didn't do an interview. They delayed a response, and all of that leaves a negative perception that you're just not handling that crisis seriously, that you're maybe not competent, and that's where it breaks down. And I mean, crisis response is hard. This is maybe the hardest part or the hardest aspect of public relations. You have to think about multiple channels and audiences. You have to think about multiple means in which you're communicating. You have to demonstrate concern. It's got to be real. It's got to be genuine. You have to be clear and well informed, and you have to give a good interview. You have to write good copy. You have to make a good video, and errors that you make, mistakes that are made, or that wrong saying, they can be scrutinized and come back. But you also have to respond in a timely manner, as we talked about just a minute ago, and speed matters. So I think it's tempting to avoid dealing with a crisis head on and getting out in front of it. But the cost of that can often be very much greater than tackling it the best way that you can. And that requires having that coordinated approach. Crisis communications is a team sport. You know, you have to have a team. And you have to have a coordinated approach across companies. So or across organizations within the company, divisions within the company. And that's tough, you know, so it can be tempting just to issue a brief statement and hope that things go away. And to be clear, statements have a place. They're an important tool that we use in a crisis, but there is no substitute for that good, genuine interview or direct engagement with a stakeholder group in person, right? And standing up in front of an issue. So it's key to have an approach, a plan that allows you to right size your response, make sure that you're responding at the right level and with the right audiences, that you're able to identify the right audiences and the like. So have a plan, have a team.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Shawn. It's always important to have a backup plan, right? Now, my question that I have for you related with media issues, you have played a key role in managing dozens of complex media issues and crises at TELUS, including taking on a New York hedge fund. Can you share your approach to crisis communication and what makes it effective? Maybe just continue with your answer with crisis communication, more focus on
yeah, we were just talking about having a plan and having a team, and I think those are your foundations. And just to build on that, have a good spokesperson. Know who is going to be your spokesperson in media, but also know who's going to be speaking to other stakeholder groups, who's going to be responsible for engaging with employees. Employees are going to have questions. And they're a really important audience and one that we often forget. You know, other stakeholder groups, customers or suppliers, government might have questions about going on. Know who is going to be engaging with those audiences and make sure that they're prepared to do that. Make sure that you're prepared to move quickly, but not too quickly. And really what I mean by that, you do have to communicate quickly in a crisis, right? You can't delay for days. But what that can lead to, that frenetic moment there is going out and making mistakes, because really all the information that you initially have in a crisis is going to be wrong. That's just human nature, and it may be entirely wrong, or it may just be that estimates are wrong, or that a number's wrong, or something like that, and that can lead us to say things in a crisis that just turn out not to be true, and not through any incompetence or trying to hide anything, but just because information evolves, and so be ready to get out there and communicate what you know, but what you really know to be true. Have a system of getting past hope and getting past sort of people's assumptions and that kind of thing to what the real truth is. And then identify an initial messaging, recognizing it's not your only chance to speak to this, what you know and what you don't know. We know this. We're researching this. You know, in the TELUS instance, it might be something along the lines of that. You know, we are having an outage. It's affecting approximately this many customers. We have a technician on the way to see what's going on there, and we'll have more information in 5 hours, 6 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is, rather than being emphatic, right? So have a plan for that. Train against it, like have the key people who are involved be familiar with it, and know who you can call on to pitch in at that critical moment. So for most clients who aren't in constant crises, I think what's important is you have an approach where you're notifying people right away, where people who might first notice a crisis understand what their responsibility is to notify. Who do I need to let know about this?
Yeah.
You know, and is there just a communications manager that I let know about this, or is it my direct supervisor that I'll let know about this, and it can cascade from there? Whatever that is, have a process for that, and communicate that so that people understand that. So that if you have, say, a technician in the field or a receptionist or your social media manager who sees some social media posts that are concerning but doesn't know what to do with that, make sure that they do know what to do with that. And then have a process for researching, for going and knowing stuff.
Okay. Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
So, Sean, as they say, the best time to plan for a crisis is before it happens, but not all organizations subscribe to this philosophy, and they have to eventually bear the brunt in the end.
Yeah.
But in your opinion, what are some of the most common mistakes organizations can make in a crisis situation?
One of them is to kind of hide from going out in front of it and taking an overly cautious approach and responding in a personal way, going out and doing media interviews, meeting directly with clients and customers and employees does carry risk, but so does not. And so I think there's an over-reliance in some areas on using the statement. And what a statement is it's a written response that you can deliver by email or other method that goes to your audience. Often we think of that in media. I mean, we often think in crisis communications, media is the audience, right? And this is a media relations exercise. And that's true. And I come out of media relations, but it's equally important to consider all of your other audience as well, like employees. In the midst of a big crisis, there can be a lot of questions and anxiety that you need to address that. Nobody likes to find out that something serious is going on in their company, the company that employs them through the media. Social media is critical. If you're not in social media in a crisis, you're not managing the crises. Communicating with, again, government regulators, what do they need to know? Like, what do you need to communicate there with customers, with people all along your supply chain and the like? All of those, you can just issue a statement, or you can have an in-person engagement where you're going and working there. And in media, there is no substitute for that interview. You've all seen media stories, TV stories in particular, where someone has a complaint about a company, something's going on. They'll do a couple of interviews, and at the end, they'll say such and such company refused to comment, but they issued a statement, and the statement said this. Well, it's not effective. There are times where you need to use a statement in a crisis, right? Initially, you don't have a lot of information. You're gearing up. You might use what we would call like a holding statement, which is just a statement that says, we're aware that this is happening. We know that this is going on. We don't have a lot of information right now, and we're researching. We're going and we're getting information, right? So we're aware of the situation. We don't know a lot about, or we don't have a lot of information about it right now. We expect that by later this afternoon or tomorrow, we're going to be able to say more, that kind of thing. And it acknowledges that people have concerns and just gives you a little bit of time to go and do that research, rather than just ignoring those initial queries and ignoring it where you're not saying anything at all because you don't know anything. That's a mistake.
Sure.
Sean, when it comes to misinformation, we know that, as you said, social media can amplify and make the situation worse. So how should companies approach these channels during a crisis?
Well, make sure that your social media team is plugged into your crises plan, knows it, understands it, and is part of that team. And oftentimes that's not done. And so have a process too for monitoring what's being said, like keeping tabs on what are people saying out there, both in social media as well as traditional media, and feeding that back in. Oftentimes, and I've seen this over and over again, organizations are ending up communicating in a vacuum. Either people are afraid to feed stuff up through their chain of power, or don't have a process to, and the like. And so assumptions are made. So have a process for monitoring what are people saying out there so that you can respond effectively to it. And there's a hesitancy, and it's a natural hesitancy, I think, to engage in misinformation in social media, but you have to. But you have to in a right way and a careful way. So be prepared to issue information in social media. One trick that works really well is to write a media release or a blog and put it on your website, and then link back to that. And so when you're responding to specific things in social media, so people can go and look at all the information, and then monitor social media. And when you're seeing misinformation or disinformation out there, don't just respond to that in a knee-jerk kind of way. look at the account. You know, if it's someone who's out there and they're clearly a troll, they've got like 5 followers and they're just hacking away at these things, you probably don't need to respond. If it's someone that has a genuine question, they're really curious about this and the like, that maybe is something you want to respond to, a factual answer, a bit of facts. Keep the emotion out of it. Be factual, be personable, be concise, recognize that people are responding to the event in an emotional way with emotion first, and that's totally normal. But on your own side, make sure that your folks who are doing this in social media can maintain that level of control and not get into it. And if you're doing that work and you're finding yourself getting angry, getting emotional about it because, you know, things are being said, walk away and have someone else sit down and take over. You know, it's hard work, right? And don't get into debates or arguments. Correct that misinformation once, and then you're done with it. And if more questions come back, if it's a legitimate question, sure, you know, answer that. But if it's kind of getting into a back and forth and it's the same information, just be done with it. You said your piece, and you're good there. So keep it cool and professional and well informed, factual. Don't give into the temptation to spin or to put out your own misinformation. That's the worst thing you can do.
You know, I was reading this crisis management example online, and I stumbled upon Johnson & Johnson's example.
Yeah.
In case of their brand Tylenol, you know, basically it was found to contain cyanide, and it led to, I think, 7 deaths.
Yeah.
And, you know, rather than reacting, you know, off the shelf, they kind of took out all the products from, you know, the stores, and they in fact establish a hotline number for worried customers to address any concerns
Yeah.
that they may have regarding Tylenol capsules.
Yeah.
You know, they could have just, you know, given out a statement, you know, rather than taking the product off the shelves. So this is a really good example of how, you know, they managed crisis really well. Can you think instance where, you know, any crisis was handled very well?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's a great example. It's a classic, right? That should be taught in the classes that your viewers have been taking. And setting up the hotline was important there because they had so many customers involved. I've been involved in a few situations where, you know, we've set up a 1-800 number or something. When you have enough customers that are calling in, having your regular customer service queues handle that, it just gets to be too much. So that was a good move on their part. And so it's harder to immediately recall a crisis that was effectively handled versus one that wasn't. And I've seen it argued online that that's because communications response to a crisis is generally done poorly, and I think there's actually a different reason for that. I don't think that actually has anything to do with it. I think that it's that if you handle a crisis well, it gets less attention. And so if or it might not get any attention at all. You've handled something well, something's happened, something's gone wrong. The company handles it well in an ethical manner. They dealt with it properly. It just doesn't get at, you know, it's not as significant event out there. And you know, you might have to be responding in social media. You might have to do a few media interviews, maybe a letter to customers, and that. But you can work your way through it. Now, there's exceptions to that, of course. That assumes that there wasn't any deceptive behavior on your part, right? There's certain things, some things that people just won't forgive, and rightly so. And so I think the classic Canadian example, the Johnson & Johnson one that you gave out, is more of a global example or an American example, was Maple Leaf Foods. So 12 years ago, they had a listeria poisoning event, and people died. And I think, if I'm recalling correctly, and correct me if this isn't right, the cause was ultimately traced back to a piece of equipment where that was designed, engineered in such a way that some food was getting caught in it. And their CEO, John McCain, I think it was 3 days into the crisis, went and did a video. And they pushed the video. Now, he was advised against doing that, I understand. The video, by today's standards, was poorly produced, poorly scripted, all those types of things. But he was genuine. He was real. He addressed the issue head on. He was empathetic, and he was competent. So he came off as empathetic and competent. And I think that was really a turning point um, in that whole crisis, and they really handled that whole crisis very well. And have come out the other side of that.
How do you see the relationship evolving now, between PR professionals and media? What trends, should professionals like us be prepared in the coming years?
Well, social media is not going anywhere.
That's for sure. Yeah.
And so you've got to have a strong presence in social media. But traditional media is not going anywhere either. It's changing. It's more fragmented. It's becoming more challenging. And I have to say, I'm a former journalist. I am passionate about the role that good journalism plays in our democracy. It's important, but it is changing. It's not going anywhere. You have to work with media, and you have to treat that seriously. But you also have to be ready to engage directly with key audiences, to be able to do your own videos and push them out, to write your own blogs and push them out. The days of doing a media release and issuing that as a response to a crisis are gone. You have to do a lot more than that, which makes communications crises management, or crises communications management rather, more complicated than it was. Harder than it was, involving more channels, a more fragmented audience, and that's just reality.
We are at the end of our coffee chat. So finally, what advice, would you give to someone just starting the career in the field of communication and PR?
So communications is an enormous field now. Internal communications, media relations, stakeholder relations, event management, social media management, on and on. You can work in corporate, government, nonprofit, consulting agency work, on and on and on. There's a lot of different areas that you can work in, and good communication, I think, plays a really important role in terms of helping people really get an organization's story and what's going on there. So you can be doing some interesting work, and crisis communications is just a small aspect of it. And so it's an important one. You're not likely to start out in a role with a lot of crisis responsibility, but you might be called upon to step up during a crisis. As we talked about earlier, maybe taking on a role outside that core team who's leading the crises, such as taking a core messaging and translating that to another stakeholder group, whether that's customers or internal team members who embrace that. Use it as an opportunity to show your skills and to learn some stuff from the people around you. And as part of that too, I think you might consider joining a local association. There's the Canadian Public Relations Society, or IABC, which is the International Association of Business Communicators. There's a lot of great communications, post-secondary education out there now in Canada. There wasn't when I started, there is now. And, so you've probably got a great foundation there, but you want to continue your professional development. These organizations can be a good way to do that. They've got good Pro-D, they've got mentorship programs and the like that you can start with.
Thank you so much, Shawn, for taking the time and taking about your journey. We are so glad to have this opportunity to interact with you. And last but not least, thank you so much, Saurabh, for co-hosting this coffee chat with Professionals and Coffee. You did a great interview. Any social media that you would like to share? Where can we find you, Shawn and Saurabh?
Yeah, well, and thanks for having me on. This has been a fun chat, I think, about an important topic, and I'm glad that you tracked me down to have it. So the easiest way to find me is probably on our website, which is apogeepr.ca. You can also find me on LinkedIn with a quick search. I come up pretty fast.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn with the name Saurabh Rathore. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Everything we do here works because of you guys. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and podcast platforms, and join our social media networks. Click the link in the description below this video or podcast, and please join us to do your own virtual coffee chat as Saurabh did today. I hope you enjoy our discussion and learn a lot about crisis communication and how does one make it a career path. Thank you, and bye for now.